bases dropped on a new edition of Soccer Down Here. It is May 6th. It's a Wednesday. It's a Wall Pass Wednesday, which means we'll be taking your questions and your comments throughout the show. Tweet at us at Soccer Down Here or join us on Twitch, twitch.tv/Soccer Down Here. Lots of stuff. We've got England, we've got Scotland, we've got Germany, we've got MLS, we've got all kinds of things to get into. John, where do you want to start?
Let's start with the home team and MLS this morning. Word came out after the show yesterday, some news about training with Atlanta United.
What are you waving?
There was a fruit fly, I guess, for lack. It's like, I don't want him in my shot. And so I see him out of the corner of my eye, and I'm just kind of waving at it. And it's like, no, get out of my shot.
Ay, Dios mío. Joys of John on video in the mornings.
You ain't kidding, brother. And, by the way, I did not mix up the diet drinks and the diet beverages. So we have our 3D hologram cup that has Mountain Dew in it to start the show off this morning. So
hologram.
Whatever these things are. I mean, isn't that what that is? I thought it was hologram.
Hologram. And
okay. So you're going to hit me back?
The cherry Coke.
Attaboy. So,
energy.
Yes. And once I have completed, as I duck out of the shot, once I've completed my Mountain Dew for the morning, we've got backup. So we're in good shape.
I don't know if good shape is the best way to put it, but okay.
Well, I'm sticking to my plans from my physician's assistant about making sure that the LBs during quarantine do not get out of control.
Uh-huh.
And if it means drinking this stuff and Diet A&W and 3% sodium, so 0 calories, that's what matters. So yeah, that's where we are. That's why I'm so chipper in the morning.
Yeah, that's one way to put it.
Yeah, you ain't kidding.
Blech. All right, what do we have on the news front today?
Well, it was yesterday where Atlanta United, now I'm searching for the email, this announced that players are coming back to training, but it's not en masse, and it's going to be a gradual process.
Yeah, it's the process that was talked about last week. I mean, it's edging back to activity. It's not reckless. It's being very careful with protocols. They're outside. They're not coming into the building. Things like that. It's the first step. I mean, it's as simple as that. It's the first step to getting back to action. And it's a necessary step, but it is only the first step in getting there. Darren Eales was on Dukes and Bell yesterday on 92.9 The Game, and he said, I think psychologically it's just good to see the start. It's one step, and we know it's going to be a long journey, but at least it is that first step toward getting back to playing matches. He said it's nice that we've got those players that are going to have that chance to go back there and feel part of that camaraderie again. At a distance, but still, it is camaraderie. And look, I mean, I think everybody's talked about this. When you're part of a group, when you're part of a working environment, and that's taken away from you, you miss that. You miss seeing the guys. You miss seeing the people in your office. You miss seeing the people that you're used to seeing on a daily basis. And this is an opportunity. Gwen is like, I've seen you enough lately, so I don't want to hear from you anymore. It's a chance for these guys to, at a distance, see one another, and you just got to follow the protocols right now and do these kinds of things to be ready when that time comes that you can play games again.
Yeah, Carlos also added to those thoughts on Twitter, saying yesterday, we're excited for the opportunity to slowly bring back our players on an individual basis. Utilizing the outdoor space, we can have a safe, controlled environment to offer the players a step in returning to play.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the facility to do it, and then now you've got the outdoor space to do it, to where you've got a lot of room. You can have a large number of guys in their own space. It's individualized training. It's not team training. It's not passing. It's not anything like that. It's going to be about just getting back into a routine. As much as anything, it's getting into a routine. It's also figuring out the right protocols. And that's something that we've seen in Germany as they've edged back into action. Figuring out how to do this. Again, there's no precedent. There's no rule book for it because you've never had this happen ever. So teams, leagues, medical departments, government agencies, everybody's trying to figure this out on the fly. MLS teams are part of that. This is a step in that direction.
And Turner Kirby came in after the announcement was made by Atlanta United and by MLS teams themselves. And Turner says, I'm hearing/seeing people say that it's, quote, too soon, end quote, to bring individuals back to training. I think I'd rather trust a league who is in constant communication with medical officials to know the situation and what is the best course of action. And it's not like they're going all out full team training. Individuals get basically half the field to themselves. It's almost like people are wishing that we don't get somewhat back to normalcy. Hashtag WellPassWednesday, one final paragraph. People are living in fear of this thing and don't understand that eventually we're going to have to learn to live with this virus. Not saying that we need to go back to 73,000 and MBS tomorrow, but these leagues understand that they need to adapt to the virus in order to move forward.
Yeah, and that's the key is figuring out how to move forward. None of this is easy. I think some of the pushback from people who think maybe it's too soon, I think maybe that is just fear. It's just fear of getting back to interacting because we know how contagious this disease is. There's no way around it. The virus is very contagious, and you have to be very, very careful. So, Atlanta United's got 6 to 7 players in these sessions, the maximum amount of space needed for players to comply with the safety protocols. Other clubs are, doing it based off their facility, how they're handling it. Orlando City, for example, they're using 2 fields. They've got them divided into 8 spots. They're following all of their CDC guidelines. They're partners with Orlando Health, just like Atlanta's partners with Piedmont Healthcare. I'm sure that's coming into play here. This is all part of the process to getting back. I do think it's a little silly to tell a team that has a bunch of professional athletes that they're doing something wrong. If the doctors want to say that, if medical personnel want to say that, different conversation. They're not playing. They're not sharing water bottles. Like they're not going into the building. They're following every protocol that you can. And if people can go to a park and exercise right now, why should a professional sports team not be able to essentially recreate that? They're not running big interactive training sessions. Are you going to have, a coach telling each player in their little section of the grid what to do? Sure. You can probably have a lot of, kind of physical fitness kind of stuff. And yeah, you're going to do that. But you're not going to be going too far in this. This is a step. It is the first step. And it's an essential one. It's really hard because I feel like every time we even talk about getting back to action, you have to continually stress that safety is the number one element here. Because people have maybe a feeling that others are rushing or jumping the gun or whatever. I want games to happen as soon as possible when it is completely safe. Period. That's safe for every person that is involved in said match. And first step is going to be training session. That's going to require testing. That's going to require a lot of different things. But when it is safe, yes, I want them to play games. I think it would be a good thing for fans. I think it would be a good thing for these players and these team staff. I mean, I think everybody's talked about how they have felt being at home, how hard it's been. People, get down from time to time. Put yourselves in the shoes of a professional athlete who started training in mid-January, If you're with Atlanta United, you've played a league match, on the road. You played a league match at home. You've played 3 CONCACAF matches. You had a preseason. You were just really starting to get going physically, and then that was taken away from you. And that's hard. For these guys, I want them to be able to do what they do. They'll feel better when they can do that. So it's got to be safe. That is the number one thing here that drives all of it. Don't get it twisted. But when you can do things safely, you need to do them, period. And that's where the testing is going to come into play in these types of situations, to where they can do more things safely. And this is, again, first step, figuring out protocols, figuring out what works, and moving from here. They're not going to play games anytime soon. If you can do this now, and you can edge towards full training sessions in a few weeks, and you can play games by the end of June, you're doing pretty well. And I think everybody would be happy with that. And that should be okay, depending on what happens outside of all of our control.
Ricky Ricardo added to the grocery list that I already had. He confirmed what I had on the grocery list this morning, coming from our friends at the Daily Mail, Amitai Winehouse. The Bundesliga has been given the green light to go ahead in the second half of May. Now the league just has to pick a date to resume. May 15th, the possible earliest date that we're looking at here. A leaked document on Wednesday said German football's return would be delayed, with suggestions that the first fixtures could only be held after a 2-week quarantine. But initial demands for that extended spell have been removed from the document. The German government has now granted approval of a return of the league in the second half of May after a series of meetings. According to Bild, the Bundesliga can pick a date, earliest being May 15th. After that decision in Wednesday's meeting of German states and Chancellor Angela Merkel, the league has to figure out the 15th or the 22nd. All games will have to take place behind closed doors, or as they're known in Germany, ghost games. Held a meeting with 16 heads of state, Chancellor Merkel did, early Wednesday morning local time, to discuss the plans, and one of the topics was resuming play on May 15th.
Yep, and that's where we're at. I mean, you're going to, I'm guessing, I think they might actually take till the 22nd. There's no need to rush. Go ahead and take till the 22nd. Come back then. That gives you a little more time. You've got, as we talked about, you had a couple positive tests. You had one second division team decide on their own to go into quarantine, which was a strange decision because others have not done that, and there's no regulation saying you need to do that. You had 10, I think I've seen some people report it as 11 positive tests out of the 1,700 plus. Okay, that's your baseline coming in. Now we will continue to see the testing in Germany, and we will go forward. But they got the green light to play. There's no need to rush it. I kind of hope they do take that extra week. You're not going to play this week. Mm-hmm. You could play next week. Take one more week now that you know, and give another week of team training, because I don't think they've progressed to that yet. I think it's still been groups, which if you've done the individual, now you've done the groups, you're doing the testing. If everything is still checking out on the testing side, you should be okay. Now, there was a thought about this, and our friend Bernd Dursberger sent over some information from Bild. There was an idea, we had talked about it initially, that at one point Germany was going to do a quarantine with their players away from the public while they played. Then they decided they weren't going to do that. Now it looks like there's going to be potentially one from now until when the season starts. Maybe it's just out of overwhelming caution. I don't know. Also, family members are going to be tested as well as part of this, which is another good, smart step. If you can do that, if you're going to do the extra special quarantine for a short period of time before the season starts, just to ensure the start goes off well, fine. If you're going to let people stay at home, but test family members that they are sharing a home with, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm assuming in Germany you've got the testing capabilities and the capacity to where it's not an issue. They've handled the PR pretty well with all of this. I think they've got everybody they needed to get on board. And this, again, should be the blueprint for England, for Spain, for Italy, for the United States, for every other country that wants to get back on the field. The way Germany is doing it is very thorough, and they're giving you the guidelines. They're showing you how it can be done.
And, you mentioned waiting until the 22nd. If you apply the standard quarantine of 2 weeks before any event further down your lifeline, you go into quarantine for 2 weeks. 14 and 6 is 20. That gets you to the 22nd in pretty decent shape. So
yeah,
I
honestly,
like.
If you say it's, you call it quarantine, but you can call it training camp.
You
know, when you go to training camp, what do? You go and you stay with your teammates, and you aren't with your home. You're away at training camp. It's pretty common in sports, right?
Yep.
So if you go and do a 2-week training camp, and you're doing it at your facility, and you're staying in a nearby hotel or whatever, okay, that's what you would do getting ready for a season anyway. So there's nothing even that weird about it. It just makes sense.
Yeah. So I think that taking that extra week, call it whatever you want to call it, call this period whatever you want to call this period, but get you to the 22nd. That should be your beginning of your ghost matches, your ghost games. And then once again, Germany should be the template for every other league going forward. And we'll get into those other leagues as we go this morning, because there are some other questions, specifically in England, about on the pitch, off the pitch, finances, and all of that stuff that we'll get into this morning. But right now, Germany is the leader in the clubhouse, and we'll see how things go with the Bundesliga going forward.
Raphael Honigstein of The Athletic said that the earliest return would be May 22nd. He said it could be May 29th. I think they actually have the green light for the 15th if they want, but that would feel a little fast.
Yeah, that's rushed.
Yeah, no need to go there.
No. So 22 or 29 should be fine when it comes to monitoring all of your athletes, your personnel, all the essential folks that you feel like you need to have in the door to make these matches happen. So 22nd or 29th to me seems about right when it comes to the return of the Bundesliga and Bundesliga 2.
Yeah, it sounds like tomorrow the league and the teams will define the schedule, the order of the dates. But yeah, they're ready to go. Tomorrow should be the schedule announcement of what day they start and where they pick up, how they make it all work.
Right. So that's what we're looking at here. And for those who are once again watching on our Twitch channel this morning, yes, I am waving my hands in the air, and it's nothing personal, and it has nothing to do with anything going on here in Office HD. Sure. I'm still battling. I'm battling fruit flies who really want a piece of my Mountain Dew. So that's where we are this morning. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that's where we are, at least internally anyway. So that's, for those of you watching, that's what's going on.
Yeah.
I blame insects. So the next time the Terminix guy comes
up, the facilities for that, big man.
Well, I would like to perhaps not have insects here. So the next time the Terminix guy makes his rounds, I will have him work the outside of the house at the back, just to make sure that these folks don't continue to work their way in as we're here in the spring working our way toward the summer.
You're fighting the insects.
I'm fighting the insects. Bring it on. So, or maybe I'm just waving them off. It's I feel like the guy at the airport bringing in the planes. You sit there and it's like, in. I hope not. That'd be bad form on my part.
Yeah, seriously.
And then making sure that maybe I should just hermetically seal Office HD, and then that way they won't be anywhere close.
Yeah, you can self-quarantine in there. There you go.
That's what I've been doing for the last 6 weeks, dude. Or 2 months. 2 months, actually. Wow. Has it been 2 months since Mexico City?
Yep.
Wow. All right. Next stop, England. How about that?
Sure.
All right. Project Restart protocols. Premier League targeting a return in small groups for May 18th. But 4 club doctors have expressed reservations about the league's Project Restart proposal, and we'll get into Project Restart in and of itself in just a bit.
Okay.
Project Restart protocols state all players and staff must be tested twice in a 1-week period prior to entering the training ground for small group training, and the Premier League is looking to organize their own drive-through testing centers away from club training grounds. Premier League presented their proposal to all 20 clubs last week, asked doctors for concerns and feedback. 4 doctors have now sent in questions which will be answered at the league's next shareholders meeting on Monday. Although, if it was important to get everybody back, I would like to think that maybe you'd answer those questions sooner than Monday. But that's just me. Monday is a day after the UK government gives an update on lockdown restrictions. Proposals have been drafted by the Premier League medical advisor following close consultation with other leagues, La Liga and Bundesliga, about how to go forward. And they get into testing. And Sky has been told a number of club doctors were involved in drafting the plan, and representatives have discussed medical protocols during a conference call that happened 2 weeks ago. And why things haven't been progressed from there, I have no idea. Once again, I'm editorializing as we're talking about the story. So and it gets into the whole idea about neutral venues, and that's another aspect of this whole conversation that we'll get into. But yeah, doctors are raising concerns about Project Restart protocols, and as many as 100 I have seen in other reports are sitting there waving their hands in the air and going, we have questions. So it looks like Project Restart has some answers before they restart.
Yeah, no surprise. Again, just follow what Germany's doing, please.
Yeah.
They seem to have things pretty well in hand. Just follow what they're doing. You probably should have already had protocols by now, but if you don't, call up the Bundesliga and say, hey, can we borrow those? Thank you.
Yes. And we get into the idea about, and Chris Hutchison is now recommending that I better get some AA for those murder hornets.
Yeah, seriously. You better be ready for that.
Have you seen any of those things yet?
I have not, but I'm not looking for them either.
I'm not either. And so I'm hoping not to see them, Chris. And if I do, then the Terminix guy's really going to get a really quick phone call. And now I'm waiting for the first minor league baseball team to come up with that as their new nickname.
Oh, it'll happen. I'm shocked it hasn't yet.
All right. Now, the finances behind what we're seeing in the Premier League.
Okay.
The Premier, and this is once again from our friends at Sky and the Daily Mail, who caught up with Aston Villa chief executive Christian Purslow. And, we've talked about this on the show, but Purslow has now come out and added Aston Villa to the list of teams, which was just now Brighton and Villa, who have come out publicly and said they don't want neutral venues to finish the rest of the season. Purslow says that relegation could cost Aston Villa £200 million.
Okay.
A £200 million catastrophe.
Yeah.
He says he likened the discussions around Project Restart with the Brexit debate because though there is consensus that football should resume as soon as it's safe to do so, there's no clear answer on how to do it. Purslow said that while the day-to-day financial losses due to the shutdown were greater at the top end of the table, for those near the bottom, the implications are greater. Quote, at the bottom end of the table, there's a much smaller revenue base, but the risk of relegation is probably the £200 million catastrophe for any club that mathematically could still go down. When you say to any club, we want you to agree to a bunch of rule changes that may make it more likely that you get relegated, they're not thinking about TV money.
That right there is a big assumption, and that's my problem with the way people are handling this. Agreeing to a bunch of rule changes that would read the quote again?
When you say to any club, we want you to agree to a bunch of rule changes that may make it more likely that you get relegated.
That may make it more likely that you get relegated. So let's just say from now on that when a team is in a relegation battle, nobody can get hurt. You can't red card anybody because that might make it more likely they get relegated. This is a giant extreme of it, but you're not going to call off a game that is going to be played in a torrential downpour on a crappy field because a team is potentially going to be in relegation trouble if they lose it. There are things out of your control. This is obviously out of your control. The question is, what would you rather do? At some point, you've got to make a decision. And I feel like we say this every show, but it's very important. England has a few decisions to make. If they want to have promotion relegation, okay. If they don't want to relegate anybody, or if they don't want to promote anybody, okay. If they just want to promote and not relegate, they would not just relegate and not promote. So we can rule that one out.
Right.
That's 3 options. All right. Then, are you going to finish the season no matter what? Are you not going to finish the season, just leave it, and declare it done? Are you going to say there's no champions? Are you going to just use the points per game to determine who gets dropped? Villa, right now, on points per game, would get relegated. They have a game in hand. The reason why they have a game in hand is they are in a cup final. Or they were in a cup final, sorry.
Yeah, they lost to Manchester City, right?
They lost to Manchester City in the League Cup final. But that's why they have a game in hand. So because they did well in the League Cup, right now they would get relegated. Okay. Villa's in an interesting spot. But this argument that, well, we can't play games in neutral sites because it might increase our chance of getting relegated. We can't play games without fans because it might increase our chances of getting relegated. We can't play games in the rain because it might increase our chances of getting relegated. We can't play games without our center back who got red carded last game because it might increase our chances of getting relegated. You can't control everything. This is obviously out of your control. These are the arguments that get in the way. These are the arguments that hold everything back. And these are the arguments that are stupid. It's time to move on and find the way that makes the most sense, period. Because not playing, if they can, is going to end up being more costly than anything. It will be. If Villa gets relegated, yeah, it's costly. They might have got relegated if this hadn't happened. They might not. But we don't know. It's those types of comments from people that are going to hold up the process and not negotiate, not plan in good faith. That's the problem with this, and that's what's making it so much more complicated. Germany, you hadn't had that, or at least you haven't had it become public.
Right.
And that's a very important thing. Germany, from the jump, talked about solidarity payments for teams that were struggling. They've already created some for third division teams and women's teams that are not attached to a Bundesliga club. That's the model there too. Follow it. If you're going to sit there and have infighting and worry about, well, if we don't play well when it's windy, and if it's going to be windy and the gusts are over 15 kilometers an hour, had to get to the metric system, then we can't play today because it might increase our chances of getting relegated. Go home, get a dog, sit on the porch, and stop crying.
He also added in his interview, Perslow said after the quote that we were talking about here, he says, they're not thinking about TV money. They're thinking, my goodness, am I going to agree to something that results in me being relegated and losing £200 million?
You can't say that it would result in it. You can't say that it wouldn't result in it. And to use it as a crutch, you're already thinking you're going to get relegated. So Stop.
Yeah. He says, we're a club that prides itself on home form. 2/3 of our wins this season have come at home. We've got 6 home games left to play, and I think any Villa fan would agree that giving up that advantage is a massive decision for somebody running Aston Villa, and I certainly wouldn't agree to that unless those circumstances are right.
Well, then you might not get those home games until 2021 at some point. And by that point, you might not be a club. And the rest of the league might have other clubs like you that go away. And let's not even forget the rest of the leagues that you're holding back because you want your home games in this situation that is outside of everybody's control. That's the problem. It's not about Aston Villa by themselves. This is not a decision about rescheduling a game that was outside of their control. This is about a global pandemic And this is about the survival of leagues and clubs below Aston Villa. You know, if you're going to sit there and find a way to hold everything up and say, well, we're not going to agree to the season being called. We're not going to agree to playing behind closed doors. We're not going to agree to neutral sites. We are only going to agree to playing the season out with fans in the stands and playing our home games as they are scheduled. That's the only thing we're going to agree to. And let's say they get a coalition to do that, right? And they hold it up, and that's the only thing that gets passed is everything is on pause. How many League 2 teams, how many League 1 teams, how many championship teams go under because of that? How many? That's the problem. You can't hold it up forever to get what you want. You're going to have to figure out a way forward. And, yeah, the argument, if you're in Aston Villa in this situation, is we are giving up these home games. It is going to hurt us. We know that. We would have had these home games. We could have expected this. We couldn't guarantee it, but we could have expected it. If we get relegated, what are you going to do for us? Like, that's the argument to have, not this type of stuff. Because what this does is this, Villa fans hear it. Villa fans say, well, we're getting screwed. This isn't right. And then you're going to have all the fighting that we saw in Scotland, all the fighting you see about these restart plans, because it's becoming selfish. And if you hold things up forever, you're going to have more clubs go out of business. It is that simple.
We've had reports that 10 of the 24 in the championship alone are in serious financial trouble.
Yeah, I mean,
then this is going into the pandemic.
If 10 of the 24 in the championship were in trouble going in, and in Germany, where clubs are generally run pretty well, you had up to 14 that could be insolvent by the beginning of June. I would imagine there's a whole lot more than 10 in the championship and a whole lot more in the divisions below that are in absolute peril right now. Yep. Yep. So sit there and cry about your home games and watch another club down the street go out of business. You've got to figure out a way forward if it's safe, if you can play games. If there's a way to play games, they need to play these games for TV purposes. And if that means the Premier League needs to kick money down the pyramid to support clubs, and yeah, Manchester City, Liverpool, they have less money to work with this year because they're going to help save other clubs. Well, the FA should probably figure out a way to make that happen. And that's where we're at.
See, now I'm torn because I have another England update for Project Restart, and then I've got a neutral site story. Since we're talking neutral sites, I'll go there.
Okay.
Premier League season will be canceled if clubs don't agree to play the remaining games on neutral grounds, according to League Managers Association Chief Executive Richard Bevan from Adam Shergold for the Daily Mail. There's been resistance about having the 92 fixtures played away from home stadiums. Bevan stressed ahead of Monday's vote on proposals to return, time isn't on our side, and the alternative is the 1920 season to be called off. He was asked on BBC Radio 4 if a vote against neutral venues would lead to a cancellation. Bevan said, quote, "Yes, I think that's probably correct. The government, if they haven't already, will be making it clear that home matches with densely populated stadia really puts into question whether social distancing rules can be adhered to. All the remaining games will be played behind closed doors for fear of spreading COVID-19. Fans may congregate outside of teams' play in their own stadiums." Neutral stadium proposal will need the approval of 14 out of the 20 to be adopted.
This is what's sad, to be just real about all this, because we've seen it in different formats. I don't know if it's lack of understanding or willful ignorance about what this virus is, that we're going to not have games in neutral sites or behind closed doors because of the fear of people gathering outside. I'd like to think that we're all a little more intelligent than that. Maybe I'm too optimistic in that front.
Some beaches in the United States would claim otherwise.
Well, it's just sad, and it's shocking, and it's if that's what it is, well, then if that fear of supporters doing that is going to prevent these games from getting played, I hope that people understand that that's what's going to affect the long-term viability of some of these clubs. Period. I mean, if we can't sit at home and watch a game from the couch instead of standing outside a venue that we can't get in, and that worry is going to keep people from playing these games and keep, TV broadcasters from having these games aired and keep sponsors from advertising and keep money from flowing to the clubs. If that's where we're at, well, then we're going to see a lot of teams go away. It's just that simple. And that would be incredibly stupid. And what I would like to hear from the clubs and from the league and associated authorities would be, one, how are you going to get the messaging out to your supporters? Do not come and stand outside of a venue that you can't get in. You ain't getting in. You're going to have a much better opportunity to watch it at home. TV partners, what are you going to do to make it obvious that people should stay home? Are you going to have a mic on the coach? Are you going to have a former club legend in the booth talking about it? Like, what are you going to do to make it special for people to stay home and watch? Authorities, what are you going to do about security? How are you going to handle this? These are the things that need to be talked about, not this idea that, well, we can't play games behind closed doors in normal venues because fans are going to stand outside. We've got to change the conversation. We've got to have the education to say this should not happen. If it does, you're going to prevent our ability to stay in business. And oh yeah, by the way, it's not safe. There's that too. So, just very, very frustrated with these arguments.
Well, and the first concern that came across by health officials, public service, was the rhetorical question of, okay, so when Liverpool wins the Premier League officially, what's going to keep all of those Liverpool fans away from Anfield to celebrate? That was the biggest question that came across the instant that all of this stuff started happening.
Safety?
Block it off. That's what those cross bucks with the orange striping are all about.
But then, this gets to a bigger issue is, at some point there is personal responsibility in all this. Mm-hmm. And you would hope that people would think about themselves and also others around them with the way this spreads. But you can't do everything for everybody every minute of the day. If you tell them, do not come here and celebrate, we will have an incredible celebration when we are all able to gather again, and we'll make it worth your while. But if you come here, you will be banned. If you show up here and we see you within a block of the stadium, you will be banned. You will not be coming into any more matches at Anfield. Whatever it takes. It shouldn't be a thing. It shouldn't be the issue. If it is, handle it. Because, again, Liverpool can handle this. Liverpool cannot play any games until 2022, and they ain't going out of business. A whole lot of other clubs, they don't have that luxury. So because Liverpool fans can't stay home and celebrate on Zoom or celebrate on Skype or celebrate on Google Hangouts and instead feel like they have to go down to a stadium that nobody's at and celebrate, and that's going to kill other clubs? Get out of here with that nonsense.
Daily Mail reveals a number of teams have delayed their returns to May 18th at the earliest, amid growing player concerns. Provisional plans would see the Premier League start back on June the 12th. Still hope among clubs that they can meet that date, but putting back the return to training could have an impact on obviously going back to June 12th, and everything cascades from there. as many as 6 Premier League clubs, and see if you're shocked by any of these. Are understood to have objected to plans to playing the remaining 92 matches at neutral venues. Mm-hmm. We've mentioned Brighton and Villa, Watford, West Ham, Norwich, Bournemouth.
What do they have in common, John?
I believe they would be all at the bottom of the table and facing relegation.
Yeah, and why would they not want to play games, John?
Because then if they're playing, then they risk being shown out for not being very good this season and could be relegated.
But France just already said, we ain't playing games and you're getting relegated.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no guarantee that this idea of not playing games would actually work. Because it has been declared very strongly that you're not going to have a 22 or 23 team Premier League next year. So the idea of promotion without relegation isn't going to happen. Do you think they're going to keep the promotion from happening? I don't.
No.
I don't see it happening. So you're screwed either way, Bournemouth, Norwich. You're going to get relegated one way or the other. So
unless you start winning,
unless you play games and take advantage of it and get yourself out of the cellar, that's where you're at.
Did you see this story that came across where you mentioned fan involvement? Premier League clubs could offer an app to fans which would send virtual cheers and jeers from their homes to stadiums in under a second in an attempt to generate atmosphere for matches behind closed doors.
That's kind of cool. If it's fast enough, then, I mean, what are we doing? Basically having like a 1-900 party line?
Probably.
Where, you got a bunch of fans on there and they're reacting to the game and you're just playing it over the loudspeakers? It's an interesting idea. It's better than piping in fake crowd noise.
Yeah.
But it's just going to be, can you get it synced up? Can you have it actually work in this case? I like the thought.
Okay, here's the deal. Liverpool, Manchester City, and Arsenal have held talks with a German technology company who've developed an app which will offer supporters 4 choices for generating noise to be played in empty grounds.
That sucks. I mean, it's better than nothing, I guess, but it's like we're hitting a sound button. I mean,
it's like you're cueing the applause sign.
Yeah, I mean, unless you're able to cue up something like this when the referee makes a call you don't like. I
wish you could just shut your big yapper.
Unless you got stuff like that, I don't want applause, cheer loudly,
yes,
boo. Hiss. I want more than that. Come on, just make it a party line. Have a party line. Have something like this. Have, a group of supporters who get the opportunity to do this, and you're basically playing it over the loudspeaker. You're going to have to make sure people aren't yelling horrible, crazy things, and you're going to have to be very careful about this. But maybe that's how you do it. Just pressing a button to give a reaction, that kind of stinks.
The app also gives clubs the option of using different sound levels for home and away supporters. And this is from the Daily Mail article, which could reduce some of the objections to the Premier League campaign being completed at neutral venues. I doubt that very seriously. No, they're still going to object, sir.
That's ridiculous.
The My Applause app is what it's called.
We're going to get that for this show.
Oh, yeah. The My Applause app has been tested by 2 Bundesliga clubs with a view to it being used in grounds if the German top flight resumes later this month. And Munich-based company HackCare, HACK-CARE, they're eager to roll out the technology to the Premier League.
Okay.
Chris Hutchison with a decent question. He wants to know if they can set up the app for a call and respond.
That'd be kind of funny. It gets louder if more people hit United after Atlanta flashes up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. technology is an amazing thing if you can make it work for this. I just want more than like 4 buttons of clap.
Well, here are your 4 buttons.
Oh, we know what the buttons are. Okay.
Yeah, if you go to myapplause.app,
Okay.
you have the home screen, and it is cheer, clap, sing, and whistle.
Oh man. I want that button.
Thank you, Bandit.
I want that button. I want better buttons than sing. What are we singing? Are we singing Lady Gaga, or are we singing a song about the club? I mean, what are we singing?
Yeah, really?
Come on.
Jurgen Kreuz of Hack Care told the Daily Mail that the app has the capacity to accommodate 1 million fans with a delay in transmitting sound to stadiums of 1/10 of a second.
Yeah, no, I mean that makes sense. Like if you're set up at the stadium and it's feeding it straight in, like yeah, it'd be quick. That would keep you from having somebody saying horrible things over the loudspeaker, so that part's good. But I guess it's better than nothing. But I don't really like that. Sorry, Hack Care.
Hack Care, the myapplause.app.
Myapplause.app.
They have 2 business models. One based on the app being embraced by the entire league and the broadcasters, and another where they do separate deals with individual clubs. Mm-hmm. Clubs could still offer it to their own supporters, pushing it as a way to connect with each other, feel a part of the match day experience. And Sky and BT have held talks about using fake crowd noise during broadcasts.
No, that's
dude, no,
don't like that.
No.
Don't like that at all. That's really dumb, and I don't know why you think that's a good idea.
Sky's plan is to make artificial crowd noise available on their red button coverage, with action on the main channel playing out as normal.
Well, that's okay. If people feel like they need fake crowd noise when there's not crowd noise, I guess. But as long as it's not mandatory for everybody to have to deal with.
Yeah. And Chris wants mini drones with lights so we can replace the cell phone flashlights at the end of the game.
Dig it. I like that.
So, I mean, Chris, you've sold us.
On that part, yes.
On that part, on that issue. So talk to the folks at myapplause.app or do this separately and
tell them to get drones.
Minidrones.app.
I need to press the drone button and have an army of drones come flying into the stadium.
You just hear like this whirring helicopter just they all come in. So when the Fireflies come out in the 75th,
they're literally flying.
70 billion drones inside
Send
MBS.
a drone attack at the Orlando midfield.
Oh, that'd be epic.
That's basically where we're at.
Where is Screaming Will Johnson these days?
I think he's still in Orlando, isn't he?
Okay, well then send it to him, make him lose his mind, which
Why
really
you
doesn't
gotta attack Will Johnson? That's not cool.
Because he's easy to get off his game.
Or no, he's not with Orlando. He is out of contract.
See? We got him out of his game to the point to where he's out of contract.
No, you didn't get him out of his game. Nobody got him out of his game. He is
except him.
He's 33 years old, man. He's had a good career. Leave Will Johnson alone. He's a very emotional player.
Yes, he is. That's one word to use.
He's been a very good player too.
Very emotional player. That's
a very good player in
the undersell of the day. Will Johnson is a very emotional player.
He is a Canadian international. Respect Canada, John.
Oh, I always respect Canada. You know that more.
Show Will Johnson the respect that he deserves.
Not so much.
Man, that's just rude.
Yeah, it is. I agree. Premier League stars are being urged to share their concerns on Project Restart via WhatsApp.
Oh, here we go with the WhatsApp again.
Yep. Each club's PFA rep is going to be reporting back over concerns.
Well, you've got to make it safe. I mean, this is part of it. Like, you've got to make it safe, and the players have to believe that it's safe. Like, if they don't, well, then you're going to have another issue convincing them it's safe. Easy.
It's
obvious.
Yeah, a delegate from each club has been tasked with gathering the thoughts of their teammates via group chats before relaying answers to the union. For Chelsea, it's Cesar Azpilicueta. Man City, it's Kevin De Bruyne. West Ham, it's Mark Noble. They're among the ones who are representing their players when it comes to this particular issue. The union wants to know their members' reservations regarding Premier League's plans to return. While most players say they will do as told, some have raised concerns about the prospect of returning to work while the country remains in lockdown. And Sergio Aguero has been at the forefront of that.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. I get the worries about safety, but it's the same concerns that are coming up everywhere, and they're valid. Is it going to be safe to go back to work? Is it going to be safe to go out into public? Is it, are you going to feel safe? That's not an easy answer for everybody, players included. There's also the other side of it where you have a number of players who want to play because they don't want to lose any more money if they are having a pay cut or a pay deferral. They want to play because it's what they do. I mean, they want to get back to whatever normalcy they can find, which I think a lot of people are in. But that doesn't mean every player is going to be loving this idea, and that's okay. But the leagues have to make a decision about when they can go forward based on the safety concerns. And they have to make that case to their players because they have to feel safe. So it's complicated. It's not easy, but there's some of this argument that it feels like is reveling in the concern as opposed to figuring out, is it okay to come back or not? The concern is human. I mean, I'm concerned when I go to the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm careful when I go to the grocery store, and yeah, that's not going to go away anytime soon. And if we're able to call games and go to a remote location to call them or call them from a studio here, I'm going to be extremely careful going in and out because I don't know that environment. I haven't been in it. I know everything in my apartment is safe. I'm not worried about touching something. When I'm somewhere that I'm not in control of it, I'm worried about touching something. It's true. I mean, that's excessive. I recognize that. The biggest concern is the coughing, is the sneezing, is that kind of side of it. But I'm staying away from people too. So I get it. But at some point, if you're going to get back, you have to get back. And the players' concerns need to be heard. They need to be addressed as best as possible. But at some point, the leagues do have to move forward. They have to for business and for, I think, the good of the population. I think these leagues, if they are able to play games, it will be a good thing for people. It's just making sure it's safe to do it.
And one of the other issues that is out there and has been brought to the fore about Premier League clubs and will apply to every league that we're going to see, sponsors losing out on advertising. And it was brought up in the Premier League because if you play at neutral venues, the clubs that are attached, the sponsors that are attached to their clubs at home venues won't be getting that same sponsorship revenue that they'd be getting otherwise if a match is on television.
You're going to have to figure out ways to address it. If you're at the virtual Etihad, you're going to have to mention these things. You're going to have to figure out how to address it. Most stadiums have the digital boards, so you can change those out. That's easy. Other in-stadium signage, yeah, you're going to lose out on that. And that's going to be a valid ask for money back. And you're going to have a negotiation. You're going to have a make good. It's what happens. You have make goods at times, depending on your deal, when ratings are bad. So you're going to have a make good in this situation because there's things out of your control. But it's still better than nothing. And that's what it keeps coming down to. You can come up with all sorts of things that are not going to be perfect about this. None of it is. But is it better to play and finish the season out and fulfill as many things as you can contractually, or you can't make it perfect so you don't play? I think that's going to do more damage. I think that would be more harmful for these leagues and teams. Okay, here's what I want you to do, John.
Yeah?
I want you to tell everybody about the greatness of our friend Steve Apolinski in Decatur, Georgia, while I get Mike Conti on the line to join us for a few minutes.
Good deal. Go to aa-legal.com. Stephen Apolinski, LLC. Trial lawyers, wrongful death, serious injury, over 30 years of experience, over $40 million in judgments for their clients. You can catch up with him a couple of different ways. You can do it on his website at aa-legal.com. You go to the aa-legal.com website, a live chat is up and running, available right this very second. If you click on the website at 4 o'clock in the morning, then you can get your chat right there. Chat live. You can give them a call at 404-377-9191 to request, if I could get my upper plate to work, a free consultation. Give them a buzz at Steve, S-T-E-V-E, at aa-legal.com. Recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend Magazine for all of the hard work that he has done. One of the most effective lawyers in Georgia. Recognized as one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia. Apolinski and Associates, aa-legal.com.
Good stuff, John. Well done.
Well, I could kind of hear when Mike comes into the conversation and that channel opens up, so I know to shut up at that point. So that's when you wrap what you're talking about for the advertising drop, and then you bring in Mike Conti.
Hola, Mike.
My bad, guys. John, I hope I didn't throw you off.
Oh, God, no. No, like I said, that's when the producer starts to kind of flick your IFB in your ear just to tell you to wrap. That's all that was to me. It's all good.
It's like when you hear that little bit of noise from the production truck just starting to creep in your ear, and you know you're about to get spoken to by the producer. I know exactly what you were talking about, Mr. Nelson.
Correct. That's all that was to me. It was all good. We got a little bit of breaking news out of the USL.
Yeah. Guys, USL, I thought you were going to talk about Bundesliga. What's going on there? Hopefully that's good news, too.
Well, do you want to start with your Bundesliga news since you were jacked up about that?
I'm jacked up about everything. We've got 3 MLS teams training today. The Bundesliga is back. I was kind of had a gut feeling over the weekend. We were going to start to get some good news this week, and I'm feeling like this has been a good morning so far.
Okay, so, Jason, you want to hit that breaking news, developing news soundery kind of thing?
Yes.
Dateline, Florida. USL permits return to training in small group settings on May 19th. Small training facilities were cleared by local and state health authorities. Paragraph. Operating under the guidance of local state health authorities. Modification to the previously announced training moratorium that will allow Championship and League One clubs at their option to open outdoor fields for non-contact training in small groups, as well as training rooms for player treatment. 2 other paragraphs follow.
Okay,
so that's your update.
So same general procedure here, except USL is skipping the individual step that MLS is on right now. So you're getting back to outside. You're not going to be inside of a building. You can do it if you're able to do that in your location, and that's one of the issues with some MLS teams. They're just not able to do these things yet, according to government guidelines. But USL is ready to go ahead to group training.
Small group settings will be limited to up to 4 players with no more than 1 athletic trainer and 1 member of a club's technical staff allowed on each field during a session. Teams in areas where local and state recommendations for stay-at-home orders have not been lifted should not train or allow treatment that is prohibited by their jurisdiction. In addition, all clubs will notify the league of their plans to return to the team's training facility prior to reopening, and training is voluntary for players.
So a lot of the same language that we've seen from Major League Soccer. This kind of parrots a little bit what has been, I think Stephen Goff was the one who reported about the NWSL getting started on the 16th in small group training. So this isn't quite what Major League Soccer is doing, but again, a baby step. And I think, as Darren Eales said on the radio last night, look, we know we got a long way to go to getting matches played again, but here's a start. And it seems like all of these organizing bodies, these federations, these leagues have done a very good job of trying to consult government and public health officials in the U.S. and Canada. Very, very careful approach, a responsible approach, one that is not going to take away resources from, hospitals and doctors and healthcare providers, basically. I'm here for all of this. This is all great. The one thing I do wonder is, how are these leagues going to address competitive balance issues? Because, for example, in Major League Soccer, as far as I know, and you guys may have heard differently than I, you only have 3 teams opening up today: Atlanta United, Inter Miami, and Sporting Kansas City. I don't know if there's another team that's been added to that list or not.
Haven't heard.
So that's what it looks like right now. Portland, Seattle, the LA teams, Philadelphia. I mean, there's some really strict stay-at-home orders in those states right now where unless these clubs can get waivers, and maybe that's something that's being worked on behind the scenes.
That's my guess.
I would, but, until that's accomplished, I do wonder about keeping the playing field, pardon the pun, level.
Yes.
Because it could create some competitive balance issues, whereas in Germany, it's been a little bit more of a federal approach as far as the Bundesliga and their clubs resuming small group training. I don't really have a full grasp of what they've done in Spain, but it feels like, again, it's been a federal approach. So it's just one more thing that the league has to tidy up to be able to either, allow every team to open their training grounds or allow the teams in affected states to move to locations where they can legally, resume their training.
I think that's it. I think right now you're not getting a competitive advantage. This is not these training sessions individually that are going to go on right now. And Turner Kirby had asked about this on Twitch. What do the individual sessions athlete?
Great question.
They're pretty basic. I mean, because there's only so much you can do. I mean, how different is it than what the players could do on their own at home? Not very. It's the start of figuring out protocols. It's an opportunity, and this is maybe the biggest advantage for an Atlanta United versus a Philadelphia, for example, in that Atlanta United staff, the team staff, is going to be able to figure out what works. Is it giving every player a water bottle and they take it home? I mean, going back to the old school youth soccer idea, you bring your water bottle with you to practice. Or are they going to leave them and then staff with gloves, with all the proper procedures, are going to come and get them and sanitize them, put a name on it, have it ready to go the next day for that player? That type of stuff that, we've talked about. People have thrown out all kinds of ideas, but you don't really know until you try it. You don't know how difficult it is until you try it. You don't know.
Right.
Are the players going to, come dressed in their gear and then go home in their gear and wash
their own gear?
Yeah. Or are you going to provide them something laying on the side of the field? Or are you going to provide them a place to go change? Like stuff like that you have to work through. Philadelphia won't get to do it firsthand, but I'm pretty sure those kinds of best practices would be shared. And you've almost got some teams that are just getting the opportunity to figure it out because they're legally active.
Right, no doubt. I think the bigger benefit to everything going on today for Atlanta United, and this is something that Darren spoke about yesterday on the radio, and if you're a season ticket holder and you were on our conference call Monday night with Darren and Brad Guzan and Carlos Bocanegra, it's really just more of a psychological boost where you aren't allowed to interact in close proximity with your teammates, but at least you can be on the same field with them. And one thing that Darren and Brad have both really expressed to me is just how much they miss the bickering, the
camaraderie.
Camaraderie is a better word.
All of it.
Trash talk. Yeah, I mean, quite good-natured, obviously, but trash talk.
Yeah.
They miss all that. Well, you can do that again now. In some ways, it's a little bit different, being 60 yards apart as opposed to being a Zoom call apart. So I think it's more of a morale boost, a psychological lift for Atlanta United and the other clubs that are going to go ahead and unlock the gates this morning than anything else. You're right, Jason. You're not going to be working on tactics. I don't even know if you're going to be doing a whole lot with the ball. Darren seemed to indicate that they would. I don't know what that would look like.
A lot of teams, and I think Atlanta is one of them, you do a lot of your fitness work with a ball. Now, This is where not just – and honestly, this isn't really – Frank DeBoer's area that you're really looking to him outside of very big, broad, basic things that you want to get across. This is where you're talking to your fitness people. This is where you're talking to, if you have an assistant who specializes in, warm up kind of activities, because that's really what you're going to be able to do. And where you can do those and incorporate a ball solo, cool. Yeah, that's great, because if you're a team that is a possession-oriented team and you play with the ball, you're going to do that. The Red Bulls, for example, it wouldn't really matter. If they're able to just do an individual session and work on fitness, they're just going to work on fitness.
Yeah, exactly right. I mean, they aren't going to be working on their press.
I'm going to press
they're just
myself.
going to run in place. That's what they're going to do.
Right,
they're going to do all the physical stuff.
But guys, I mean, I'm optimistic. I'm excited. I know some people have chosen to look at the potential consequences of this, and sure, I mean, there's obviously consequences in anything we do in this world right now. But I think it just speaks to, and I hope I'm not alone in my level of excitement over this. I just think it speaks to how valuable it will be to get something back. I think we're all realistic enough to know that, games themselves are not going to look the same for a while as far as number of fans, if any fans at all. But we're just so starved to have a distraction and have something that we can be passionate about. And this is a very small first step to getting back there. When Major League Soccer extended its training moratorium to May 15th and subsequently said they hope to get matches restarted on June 9th, I thought that, there's absolutely no chance they would start on June 9th. July 9th might be lucky.
Yeah, I pegged July 4th really as that date,
I think that's a lot more realistic now, John. I really do. I mean, if you can get to the point where by the end of this month, and I don't think this is unrealistic, if you can get to the point where by the end of this month, you are kind of graduating from that small group phase. And remember, we aren't in the small group phase in MLS. Right. But if we can graduate from that small group phase to full team training by the end of this month, everyone I've talked to has said 4 weeks, 5 at the most, and everyone will be match fit and ready to go. And that's where you get into July 4th. And now you get into the questions of how many rounds you're going to be able to play, and can you play a full 34 if you move the postseason back into December or later? I think you can. You obviously have a major logistical hurdle to deal with as far as where these matches are going to be played and if you go into a bubble or not. But the momentum seems to be, based on what Major League Baseball has been talking about, guys, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the Bundesliga is doing this too, still playing in home stadiums. Not with fans, but playing in home stadiums.
Yeah, right now,
Not doing the Biodome thing, which I think players were rightfully resistant to. That's a long time to spend away from your family. I know the NBA is talking about making some concessions to the players where family would be allowed to come with them to whatever Biodome you go into. But it feels
let's be clear about something Germany's doing that I think, if you're not going to do that, has to be part of this. The testing, and it's voluntary, but I mean it's kind of a no-brainer, includes family members. So, people you are sharing a home with are going to be part of the Bundesliga testing process, which is very smart, because then you can avoid that. These first steps are key for that kind of stuff, because we saw with Germany, the first round of testing, you had 10 or 11 positive tests out of 1,700 plus. Mm-hmm. And how you deal with it now, it'll help you figure out those protocols. I'm glad that we got past the idea of one positive test means you have to shut everything down.
Yep.
Because that's not
totally
realistic. It doesn't make sense. It's not realistic for much of anything. Do you have to change? Yes. Do you have to isolate? Yes. Do you have to do the things to maintain safety? Absolutely. But you can still move forward. And that's what we have to get to across all of our societies, in that you don't want anybody to test positive. But if they do, we've got to find a way to take care of them while still moving forward.
Well, yes, exactly. And I've been saying for a while, and I know there are some people who disagree with this, but it's just absolutely impractical to press on with the idea that not a single person can test positive. That is not a realistic or practical solution. You have to have protocols in place to deal with positive tests. When Major League Baseball resumes, you're going to have some people testing positive in the sphere of the league. Same in the NBA, same in the NHL, same in Major League Soccer. It's going to happen. You don't want it to go from a positive test to an outbreak. So here again is where Germany, I think, is going to lay down a blueprint for a lot of professional sports leagues around the world. And it's something I've said, for a long time. I think we're all kind of looking for an organized professional league to go first and kind of lay out a plan and explain it. And it sounds like the Bundesliga is going to be that league.
Germany in soccer and the KBO in baseball. I mean, I hope Major League Baseball is paying attention. Don't have to do everything exactly because there are some cultural differences, and each country has differences with dealing with the virus as a whole. But you've got people that are creating those best practices that we just don't have.
Yeah, agreed. But it's funny. For me, it kind of changes by the day, sometimes the hour, my level of optimism. And, I would say this time last week, I would have thought July 4th for a restart to play would be nice, but maybe not realistic. Now I think it's a lot more realistic. Still a lot more issues to work. And I think the biggest issue, again, is where are these matches going to be played? You're going to have to redraw the schedule in all likelihood. Maybe you don't, but I
you
would...
will. And the reason why I think it's going to be different than Germany is, you mentioned it, Germany's had the federal level of control, and the states have all been together. It's a much smaller country. Here, I don't think there's any way you can guarantee that every state with an MLS team, with a USL team, will be able to have even behind closed doors games when you're able to start. So you're going to have to at least have some, all right, if you can't play a game in Pennsylvania, where does Philadelphia play the game that they're supposed to be at home in?
Yeah, great point. Really, very, very good point. That's a great point. But that is a logistical challenge. That is redrawing the schedule is going to take weeks.
Yep.
There's a lot of things that go into play there, and I don't know if they could have even been working on a draft schedule at this point, because there have been so many variables and so many things that have not come into focus until relatively recently. You've got to consult with broadcast partners. You have to consult with state and local governments. It's going to be complicated. It's going to be difficult, but I don't think we're in a holding pattern anymore. Does that make sense? I think now you can release the parking brake a little bit and start to work on these things that are going to take some time, but hopefully you'll get the blessing of all sides. The one thing that really strikes me, guys, and I don't know if it might be just a little thing that I'm overthinking. If you look at some of the Twitter accounts of Atlanta United players over the last 24 hours, there seems to be genuine excitement in getting back to that training ground. These guys want to play. I think in some European leagues, you've heard anecdotally some pretty strong objections from players about wanting to play right now. I don't think we, at least in terms of Atlanta United, I don't think we have that. And I would imagine that probably reflects much of Major League Soccer, if not all of it right now. And that's important. If you don't have buy-in from the players and the clubs, this isn't going to work. I think you've got it. And just to see Franco Escobar tweet about how excited he is to get back at the training ground today, I'm really encouraged by that. I'm very excited to see that. And he speaks for me. I'm excited to get back. I mean, I know we're not going to be allowed there, but I'm just excited to, see whatever pool video and pool photographs come out of this today, because it'll just feel good to see that little tiny sliver of semi-normalcy back on our computer screens and our TV screens.
I think Atlanta's had a culture of training and enjoying the training, and that's a big part of it. So you haven't had – we talked about some of the Premier League players that are pushing back on it. I think the situation in England and the way the league is handling it, the way the clubs are handling it, is nowhere near as good as what MLS has done. It's a different structure. Nowhere near as good as what the Bundesliga has done. And I'm with you. I think in general – MLS players do want to get back on the field, and they'll do what it takes to get there.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm excited for it. I'm really excited to hear the news about USL. I think that's huge.
Yeah,
I
had
was
concerns about USL.
I was genuinely concerned about USL just because the economics are a lot different. And if USL could get cranked back up midsummer and play through the end of the year, I think that's going to give some of the clubs that might have been in real danger a fighting chance.
Yep.
The other thing, too, is in USL, the size of some of the stadiums used in that league could lend itself to potentially having some fans. And Pennsylvania might be a bad example because they're locked down like very few states are right now. But if that got loosened, you could easily achieve 2,000 people socially distanced at that stadium in Pittsburgh for a Riverhounds game. Some of these, like Louisville playing at the baseball. Well, I don't know. Is Louisville's new stadium going to be open this year?
Yes.
Okay. So, but there again, that's a 10, 15,000 seat stadium where you might be able to space people out. It's not as difficult as, say, doing so in a NFL stadium or a very, very large soccer-specific stadium. So that's huge, too. Kennesaw would be a great example. You could probably very easily spread out the crowd at a place like Kennesaw and have not a sold-out crowd, but fans in there to provide a little bit of atmosphere and enjoyment.
Mike, you mentioned the culture of Atlanta United fans, and I wanted to get into something that you were a part of a couple nights ago, and I think there's another one involving supporters groups just around the corner.
Yeah.
The sense of normalcy that you got to experience with the town hall. What do we call them with Zoom now? Just want to like a Zoom town hall or a Zoom hall? Or whatever?
We had like fancy TV production and everything on Monday. Tonight is on Zoom. So I don't know what you would call it on Monday.
But just the
Brady
idea,
Bunch town hall.
Yeah, you had the Brady Bunch town hall. What was it like for you to be a part of that sense of normalcy and knowing that everybody who could get into that Brady Bunch town hall wanted to be a part of it?
Oh no, it felt great. It really felt great. I'm very grateful to Matt Moore and everyone at the club who have given me a little bit of work to do here and there. Even if it's something as simple as, calling people juggling rolls of toilet paper. It's just nice to have something to do and have it be soccer related. I really do feel like we're a big, big family. And it's something that Jason has articulated so well. But I feel like I've come to know so many of you who are listening to us now personally, whether it be through in-person interaction or on social media. So I think it was just good to be back with the family Monday night. And it'll be good to be back with the family again tonight if you're on that supporters call. I know Miles Robinson's joining us and Darren and Carlos again. It was fun before we even went live on Monday, just kind of, joshing each other a little bit, people making fun of me for needing a haircut, which is obviously very true. Carlos was trying to hang a Piqué shirt behind him on some coat rack and couldn't do it. We were giving him crap for that. So it was good just to bust each other's chops a little bit. It really felt like a little bit of a family reunion, and in a different way because we weren't in person. But it was great, and I'm really looking forward to tonight. We got some great questions on Monday. I know we're going to have a lot of great questions tonight as well. And look, I know there are people with differing viewpoints and differing feelings on whether or not now is the appropriate time to kind of start our way back to as close to normal as we can get with Major League Soccer. And I fully respect that. And I think an exchange of ideas and viewpoints is, when it's civil, it can be very productive. But I think, again, we need to keep in mind that the club is very, very sensitive to those concerns. The club is certainly very sensitive to doing right by their supporters and their season ticket holders. And I think just a little more patience will go a long way to us feeling very, very good about where this is all going to end up, hopefully sooner rather than later.
All right, Mike, I know you've got big radio station business to take care of.
I got to get on a NASCAR conference call. So I'm going to do that. But 2 p.m. we'll reconvene for stoppage time, if that sounds good to you, Jason.
Yep. Talk to you then.
All right, see you guys.
Thanks, Mike. All right, we've got other news to get into. What else we have, John?
Back to England.
Man, still
Quoting.
in England.
Oh yeah, still in England.
Okay.
A couple of other stories that are hanging out. One having to do with the Premier League defending parachute payments after the discussion that we had yesterday, where folks were yelling about parachute payments. Rick Perry from the PFA saying that it was evil. I think was the word that he used. Evil. But first thing I wanted to get to was the probability that the Premier League is set to revamp the owners and directors test in light of the Newcastle takeover backed by the Saudi Public Investment Fund.
Probably should have done that a while ago, but okay.
That's what I'm thinking.
Have at it.
So that's what they're thinking right now. And because of that, so of course the stupid story disappears when you go backwards. Oh, of course. So let's see. Daily Mail, Newcastle.
We have been hoodwinked, bamboozled, led astray, run amok, and flat out deceived
By my phone, because I have multiple devices going up and running at the same time. And I thought that I had just triggered the story, but it decided it didn't want to. Daily Mail. Give it to me. Come on, Daily Mail. Newcastle.
I am having a very bad day.
I have very bad days all the time.
I am in no mood.
Oh, please. Stephen A. The last person that I wish to speak to about this kind of thing. But, yeah, so to your point.
Let me explain something to you three cartoon characters.
Yeah, who's the third one? The moral... Yes, yeah, really? Yeah, thanks for cooperating. Craig Hope for the Daily Mail.
Thank you, Craig.
The moral, political, and legal difficulties are likely to see the revamp of the test. The £300 million pound deal is awaiting league's approval, but the process is understood to have been held up given the complexity of broadcast piracy allegations against the Saudi state. Sources close to the deal suspect a decision could even be delayed until next week, especially as the matter of if and when the Premier League comes back and plays. It gets into the notion of Qatar-based beIN Sports, the Premier League TV rights holder, written to the league objecting to the takeover, citing the illegal streaming of top-flight matches in Saudi Arabia. Sources close to the process believe the Premier League have been abandoned by the government and left to make a decision that will see a major fallout, whether they reject the takeover or sign off on it.
You can have the government involved. You can have whoever involved. It's still going to be complicated. I mean, there's two major issues, and you notice that they say that the issue that is going to hold it up is the one that we told you was going to hold it up. It was going to be the piracy, because that's about the business. The ship sailed a long time ago about ethics and about the morality of the people they are looking for in ownership positions. That they already made those decisions. Could you try to put the genie back in the bottle? Maybe. We'll see how that goes. You know what I think's going to happen here? I think
they're going to approve it.
Well, no, I think it's going to get approved. There's no question. But I think what's going to happen is the back and forth is going to be, well, we think that you might have at least looked the other way when it came to this piracy stuff. And you know, hey, we're not happy about that. But if you would like to cut another check as a penalty for that, we'll go ahead and move forward with this. I mean, that's what's going to happen. That's the kind of thing you're going to get to at this point. Is they'll admit to not cracking down on it the way that it should have been cracked down on.
We're sorry.
Penalty. Yeah, but they'll pay a penalty. That's what the sorry will be. The actual we're sorry doesn't really matter. It's all about the Benjamins or whatever is on the pound
queen
these days. Yeah, the queens, except she's alive, so that's a little weird. So it'll be all about the cash. It'll be all about the straight cash, and that's what's going to decide this. That was always what was going to decide it. You know, you can't all of a sudden draw up morality clauses in this. You've already went past that.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not going to kick people out. And you can't pick one side against the other in this.
Can't pick your morals, no.
No, you can't pick, well, this one's okay, this one's not okay. That's not going to fly. So you're stuck. So they're going to get as much money as they can out of it, and they're going to move forward. That's just how it's going to go. Sources
say the league is being portrayed as the bad guys, in quotation marks, despite having done more than any other major league to tackle piracy. Daily Mail is told the framework of the owners and directors test that has left them exposed. And as such, a review of the process of examining prospective new owners is expected once the Newcastle takeover is resolved.
Okay, we'll see how this goes. Check will be cut and all will be fine.
Pretty much. Also, get into the parachute payments in just a little bit, but we've talked about divisions.
Okay.
And it is, if the ad that Google has put up in front of the Daily Mail on my computer would get out of the damn way.
Here we go.
League One and League Two are being abandoned next week, with the EFL continuing the season. And so that is a majority of the clubs now in the third and fourth, basically League One and League Two, do not want to carry on, according to the article.
Unless it's going to be worth their while to do it, and if you're not playing with fans, it's probably not. So, and there's not the big TV money. Is there any TV money in League One and League Two?
Minimal at best, yeah.
So, yeah, that's a very valid issue, and I'm not surprised.
Yep. Third and fourth tier, they're going to have a meeting next week over the decision and the idea of whether or not to continue. So that's, we've talked about League One, League Two. We've talked about promotion relegation. We've talked about the financing that really isn't there short of game day revenues. And I think that you're going to have a lot of clubs. And we mentioned the championship earlier in the show, but League One and League Two specifically, how many of these clubs are going to have issues when it comes to operating once we get to the other side of the pandemic? I think that's the larger question that's associated with them.
Yeah, they're going to take a massive hit. There's just no way around it.
I just wonder how different the landscape is going to be. How many of the clubs from League Two that would be left would be physically able to take that step up and go to League One? How many National League clubs, like a team like Barrow, who's looking to be promoted to the fourth division for the first time in 50 years, how are they going to be, looking at all of this? Obviously, they would be devastated if they don't get promoted in the current landscape. But if they're financially capable of making that next step, it might end up being something that ends up being done by default by Barrow instead of normal ways to have it done.
The longer it goes, my gut feeling is this on where it goes. I think you're going to see the Premier League have a normal number of teams. I think you're going to see the Championship have a normal number of teams, maybe even come back to 20. I think League One, League Two, National League, you could see a conglomeration of regional. You could see a combined, regionalized third, fourth, and fifth tier even, depending on how many teams are affected. And you play a season like that to recalibrate, essentially, into League One and League Two. I think that's where you're going to go. I don't know how else you're going to do it, because you're going to have some of these small clubs that are not going to be able to field a team next year or not be able to compete on the same level they were, and you might just be best to lump them all into regions. They play, if you have 3 regions, we're spitballing here, and you have
North,
3
Central,
teams
South
that would go up to the championship, then okay, each region winner goes up. And if you want to have a playoff at the end to determine that winner, okay. You're going to have to get creative. And the longer this goes and we see what the overall effects are going to be, these are the kinds of things that are going to need to be brought to the table. This idea that, well, we've never done it this way, or, well, that's not how we normally do it. People in the game are going to have to throw that in the trash and get creative, because that's what it's going to take to survive.
as few as 3, and this is according to the Daily Mail article, as few as 3 League One sides, according to the report, are keen to play the rest of their matches. And there's also a threat of legal action for some clubs if they're made to play on during the coronavirus crisis.
That's where you've got these issues with the league and the FA not taking leadership roles and not handling this strongly from the beginning. Look, I know it's complicated because the Premier League is its own entity. The Football League is its own entity. They're both part of the FA. They have a relationship, but they don't have control over one another. This is where you need leaders to step up and say, we understand what Premier League clubs are facing. We understand what Championship clubs are facing. And we understand that both of those are very different from one another, and they're very different from what League One and League Two teams are facing. We need to figure out what's best at each level because they're different levels, and that's okay. And teams will move up and down between the levels. That's how it's set up. That's fine. But in general, the levels are different because you have clubs at different stages of their development. You have clubs at different levels of financial resources. You just have different levels, and you need to treat it as such.
There's also talk that, and we've had this discussion in the past, where, say, League One and League Two would just do their promotion relegation, they do the promotion playoffs and determine promotion and relegation that way. Clubs are even resistant to doing that right now in the current landscape as well.
Yeah, and that's going to affect how you handle promotion relegation from those lower divisions. And you're going to have to make that decision when you can. You know, right now in England, you have to figure out if and how the Premier League and the Championship will finish their seasons. League One and League Two, it's far less likely that they'll finish their seasons. And if that's the case, that's the case. Then you figure out what to do with that. And then you figure out what to do about next year. Because next year has the promotion relegation element to it at the beginning, but also what next year looks like. If you change the way the league's structured, if you go regional, if you play less games, if you eliminate some travel, if you're going to play behind closed doors, are you even going to be able to start these lower divisions? Because, again, you don't have the TV money to back it up. So you've got step by step with this, but you've got to stay focused in the way you're driving this. Premier League, figure out what you're going to do. Championship, are you going to be able to promote teams? Are you going to be able to finish? You've got financial implications with TV. Okay, you're going to be able to finish. Cool, we're on the same path. Lower divisions, you do what you got to do. We will figure out promotion to the championship if and when that comes up. We're not there yet. We can't worry about that right now. If you can't play because of the financial concerns, we get it. We understand. Okay, let's move forward. And we'll figure out next year when we figure out when this season is over across the board.
From our friends at Sky, remember yesterday when we were talking on the show, the big conference call, the Zoom call basically that EFL Chairman Rick Perry had at a parliamentary committee giving evidence to the Digital Culture Media Sport Committee, where parachute payments are an evil that needs to be eradicated. Yeah. That was his money quote. Premier League spokesperson tells Sky the payments are, quote, a vital mechanism to give relegated clubs financial support when they drop down to the championship. Parachute payments give newly promoted clubs, this is from the Premier League spokesperson, parachute payments give newly promoted clubs the confidence to invest in their squads to be competitive in the Premier League. They're also a vital mechanism to give relegated clubs financial support while adjusting to significantly lower revenues and having a higher cost base related to their playing squads. The championship is a highly competitive league with attendances, viewing figures, and revenues, the envy of second-tier leagues around the world. We see no evidence that parachute payments distort performance at that level and are an essential part of this highly competitive environment.
They absolutely distort the performance on the field because, duh, that's idiotic to even make that statement. But are they necessary? Yeah, I think they are, at least in the short term. Could you structure them differently? Could you give a smaller chunk but spread it over a longer period of time? Yep. Could you force teams to use it in certain ways? It'd be nice, but you probably couldn't. It does distort it. It's a no-brainer because teams that get relegated are able to plan on revenues that nobody else in the league can, which means they can spend that on players like no other team in the league can, because other teams in the league are not getting that parachute payment. It's that simple. This isn't rocket science. Money talks. You very rarely, for all the Pollyanna garbage that people want to throw around in a game at times, you very rarely see the team that spends far less money beat the team that spends more money on a regular basis. If it's close, okay, different conversation. But you just don't see it. You don't see the plucky underdog win the title on a regular basis. It doesn't happen. So money creates championships. They create wins. It creates points. It creates promotion possibilities out of the championship. Those things are just there, and you have to accept it.
Time to go to Scotland.
Oh, boy. Oh, boy. I'm afraid. I'm very scared. I don't know what we're about to get into, but let's do this.
Couple of different things. So having multiple stories from Scotland this morning.
In Scotland,
Today, we get to hear from our buddy Neil Doncaster again.
Oh, boy. What's Neil talking about?
All right. From Stephen McGowan for the Scottish Daily Mail.
Okay.
SPFL Chief Exec Neil Doncaster has warned of grave peril, in quotation marks, for clubs unless the Scottish government agrees to provide an emergency bailout.
Yeah, that's probably 100% true.
Request for financial relief came during a video conference between Doncaster, Scottish Football Association Chief Ian Maxwell, Sports Minister, National Clinical Director, Professor, and reps of the Scottish Rugby and Scottish Horse Racing leagues, federations.
Yeah, sport as a whole. I mean, that's not a surprise, and you're starting to see more of these things. I mean, even in the United States, for example, John Wall Street had a piece in the newsletter this morning from SI.com. Coalition seeking $8.5 billion to ensure youth sports infrastructure survives COVID-related cancellations. There are leagues outside of the major professional leagues in the Premier League, and I think the championship would be included in that. I think MLS and all the major professional leagues here, the Bundesliga, et cetera, that are going to take a hit but can weather that with less damage. Scotland, outside of Celtic, Aberdeen has done a great job in running its business, and I think they'll be able to do it because they've handled the business really well. But in general, the size of that club, they are going to take a huge hit. Rangers has been a mess financially for a long time.
We'll get to them in a second.
Even though they're a big club, they've been a mess financially, so you're going to be in the trouble side. So every club in Scotland outside of Celtic, and even Celtic will take a hit, is in grave peril. That's accurate. Just like you saw the XFL had to go bankrupt here. Awful luck with starting the league again this time around. You're going to see lower division, smaller professional leagues, youth sports, amateur sports, these other leagues that don't have the same revenues that the major leagues do. They're either going to have to basically go away and reconstitute themselves. They're going to go out of business. They're going to go bankrupt, or they're going to need a bailout to survive. That is just the reality of this.
We've seen it with the discussion of minor league baseball, here in the States, where Major League Baseball is trying to trim the number of franchises by a third, I think.
Well, no, let's be real about this, because everybody was wanting to trash Major League Baseball on this when they were doing it in January. Well, now if they have to do it, I can't argue with it. I can't argue with Major League Baseball saying that we need to cut costs before this. And now, how many games are they going to play with no revenue in the stands?
Mm-hmm.
A lot.
Yep.
Does that mean you're going to lose some single-A teams, some double-A teams, even some triple-A teams? Yeah, it does. You can't throw shade at Major League Baseball on that anymore. They're going to take a massive hit.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody is. So those areas of investment and minor league baseball is an investment by the major league teams, you're not going to have as much money to invest. It's just that simple. It was the concern with Premier League teams, with La Liga teams, with Serie A teams that have women's teams. Are they going to continue to invest? In MLS, are you going to continue to invest in your academy? Are you going to continue to invest in your USL team? These are valid questions, and they're difficult for everybody to answer. So Major League Baseball looking at cutting teams? Duh.
I think you're going to get closer to the one-for-one model per class. I think you're probably going to end up having some merging of teams geographically who sit there and they may
have major league teams that partner on minor league teams.
Yeah.
You're going to go back to those days. And that's just what it's going to be. We've got to, again, throw all this out that we have to do this. If a minor league team is not financially viable after you get back to play in this, if you look at it and you say this team has lost $10 million a year for 5 years and they have an old facility and we're not getting anything out of it, well, you don't have $50 million to lose over the next 5 years.
Nope.
Like, that's just the reality of this. So then how do you develop players? You might have to partner. You might have to loan players out like soccer teams do, where, well, we've got this guy that we don't have a AAA team right now because ours went bust. And we've got a guy who's better than the AA team that we have. We're going to loan him to the Dodgers AAA team because he'll get a chance to play. You're going to have stuff like that. It's going to get weird. And, well, that's where you're at. But the point from Scotland is the Scottish League outside of Celtic is not a major money-making financial windfall of dollars coming in. So, yeah. The SPFL going with other sports to the government and saying we need a bailout, not surprised.
Yep. Neil Doncaster said we gave the minister a frank summary of the existential crisis our game is facing. Gate receipts make up a far higher proportion of benefits from huge TV deals, so until we get back to playing in front of crowds, our game will remain in grave peril.
Yeah, no, absolutely no shock. It's going to be very hard for Scotland as a whole to play behind closed doors because of that. I think you might be able to find a way to make it happen at the top flight. The lower divisions, it's the same conversation as England. Can you really do it? Probably not.
And you mentioned Rangers. So, according to our friend Aidan Scott at the Scottish Sun newspaper, the ex-SPL chief, Roger Mitchell, insists that he can't see Rangers surviving coronavirus crisis as he claims they're in dire financial straits. He said on Twitter, on social media, I just get a strong feeling with these delays that Rangers aren't going to make it. I can't see how they survive this COVID black swan. The question is, do they take the whole of Scottish football with them? Critical days.
The report back in November, and I might be wrong on the exact timing, but it was before the first of the year, was that Rangers needed an 8-figure investment to finish the season.
Right.
They got something because they ended up not selling a player that they could have maybe gotten 8 figures for. So they got something. Either that was incorrect or it was overstated. They didn't make that sale. Well, now, and you couldn't predict this was going to happen, now you're stuck. Rangers was in financial peril before this.
Yes.
And most clubs in Scotland were in financial peril of some sort. That's the concern. And, yeah, we've talked about this with the whole SPFL thing. The idea that, everybody's talking about Rangers and the SPFL, and they don't want Celtic to win the title. That's a subplot. The bigger issue is the fact that the SPFL has looked like fools in handling this. They've made it worse. It's dragged on. They haven't made any decisions. And that's what's hurting all this. I mean, they have to make a decision going forward and move on. Rangers can't stop everything on their own. Rangers can lobby, Rangers can threaten, they can stomp their feet, but the reason why you were able to actually get an extraordinary general meeting passed, an EGM, was because the CFL and the whole voting process was an absolute joke. And you voted that you would relegate teams without finishing the season out. You didn't really create the plan. You didn't get buy-in. You didn't get any kind of reconstruction plan as part of that vote. It was all like, well, we got to do this, and then we can talk about that. Well, that's not how this works. So Rangers pushed forward with an EGM because you had enough clubs to support it. Rangers can't stop everything on their own. The SPFL and Scottish football needs to stop with this, victim mentality and this blaming back and forth of, it's all Rangers' fault or it's all Celtic fault, depending on who you like and who you don't like. It's Scottish football's fault. And they have to do a better job of moving forward past this nonsense.
BBC in Scotland, BBC Sports Scotland, in what might be the next step that is to discuss
News service.
check.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, come on. Why not now? Scottish Premiership clubs will discuss a proposal for a 14-14-16 model of league reconstruction later this week.
Adding 2 teams. That's adding 2 teams from what you currently have and going from 4 tiers to 3, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Expanding the top tier by 2, inviting 2 clubs into the bottom tier, expanding the number of senior clubs from 42 to 44, and reducing your divisions from 4 to 3. And a reconstruction group met on Monday, and that option is going to be discussed tomorrow to see if there is enough to support that. So that is the next idea that has come across the bow when it comes to the Scottish Championship.
Well, maybe our friends at Dundee pushed that forward and started getting that going. So good for them if they did. It still should have been part of the initial conversation. These things should not have been separate.
So instead of going 42 to 44, you condense things down to 3 divisions, and that's next in line. Story out of the lower divisions in England that I just wanted to bring up to kind of put into microcosm just how stupid things are at times in the lower divisions.
Mm-hmm.
Police have been called in, this is from the Daily Mail, to seize 2 the cops have been called in to recoup 2 club cars from ex-Charlton Athletic chairman Matt Southall, 2 Range Rovers worth over $100,000 each, as Southall and Charlton Athletic are going at each other's throats. Southall is claiming wrongful dismissal after being ousted from the Championship Club board in March. He made £1.8 million in unauthorized payments from club finances to himself and associates, and of course, Southall strongly denies the allegations.
So Charlton Athletic is a financial mess. They're one of the clubs that has been in a massive financial mess.
Yes.
You got the chairman moving money into his own accounts. You get him fired, and you're in a financial mess, but you have 2 Range Rovers that the chairman has. Because you need 2 club cars, obviously.
Right.
You can't just
one
have
for weekdays,
one.
one
You
for
have
weekends.
to have both colors that the team wears. Just if you're going to wear the away kit, and you got to drive that one to the game that day.
Right.
You got fired. They're not your cars, and they're going to come and get them. That's how these things work. But the bigger point is Charlton is a financial dumpster fire. Yeah, you've got people running around driving club Range Rovers, and they've had them for, a couple of months now after getting fired for moving money from club accounts into your personal accounts, and now you're going to get the Range Rovers. Maybe Charlton Athletic should just worry about actually bringing in some money as opposed to 2 Range Rovers for the chairman.
The majority shareholder of the company that purchased Charlton Athletic from the previously hyper-troubled ownership group that the fans hated and wanted out has refused to put more money into the club until this ousted club president is no longer a part of the investment firm that bought the club back in January.
This is a very worldwide thing. It's not something we really see here in this country as much because of the way our professional sports are managed. But you see these situations. We've seen it at Manchester United. Glazer out. We've seen it. Every club probably ever has had the situation where it's, owner out. Well, here, when you say, the owner needs to be out, well, then the team might not exist anymore. The team might move. The team might get sold to somebody who moves it to Las Vegas or wherever. You don't see that argument. I mean, maybe the Redskins and Daniel Snyder.
Snyder.
Some of it. You get complaints about him, but you don't see, Snyder out. Well, he owns the thing, so he can't be out. Like
Al Davis, Mark Davis.
Yeah, and they moved to Vegas. So, I mean, yeah, Oakland fans, you can want the owner out, but now you don't have a team. And the owner's still there, by the way, so that doesn't even work. Look, it's just a different mentality. Like, it's always weird to me because you hear this, we want the owner out. Well, what's the guarantee that your club still survives? Because that's where we are in the modern world of sport. It's not just a nice little neighborhood club that if the owner leaves and walks out the door, that somebody else will be able to just walk in and pick it up and keep it moving. It's not where these clubs are anymore. Charlton Athletic can't just move forward because they always have. And we're going to see that with all this situation. Owners have to be good stewards of the club. In most occasions, owners are not getting rich on this. Most owners are trying to break even, essentially, and they get the thrill of owning a team and being part of it and making these big decisions. But this whole owner out thing is just weird to me, and it's a absolute sidebar and rabbit hole that I just took us down. But that's kind of
no worries.
It comes up so often, and I'm just like, that's such a weird concept because we don't have that here. We don't have that mentality here because of the way our teams are. If you had wanted, and let's go. Well, no, that is. I mean, let's go back to.
I was thinking of other owners, and I was thinking of Atlanta Spirit.
No, but okay, you want them out. Well, now you don't have a hockey team. Good job, they're out. I mean, that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't work that way. Like, you don't see Charlton Athletic move to another site. Here, you would. You wanted Rankin Smith out with the Falcons. Well, he would have sold the team. They would have ended up in Jacksonville at one point.
Correct.
The Hawks. You wanted the Hawks to sell the team. Well, then they would have been in New Orleans. They played some home games in New Orleans in the 80s.
They did.
All those things will happen here, whereas with a European team, a South American team, the club is either going to, in almost every case, either be sold and somebody will come in and just pick it up and move on, or it will disappear and have to be reconstituted. You don't see clubs move, really. In the U.S. you do. So it's a different mentality.
It is. Tafka says, anybody wonder where the hell you store all your information on random clubs and leagues? I mean, was there anyone on the planet better prepared to discuss all the COVID effects upon clubs in the four corners of the earth? So props, Tafka, to you.
I appreciate it. I mean, I just pay attention.
We study.
I mean, there's just work to do on it. And I think, we talked about this with soccer over there. Like, I don't study other leagues on the field as much as I do with MLS and with USL because I'm calling games and I'm having to go deeper into it here. I only have so many hours in the day. But I've really worked on trying to at least know the bullet points, the conversation points about how leagues are structured, what challenges they have, and this has allowed that to maybe get amplified a little bit more because there's not as much in one league to talk about. It's a lot of stuff around the world. So I think you have to have a little bit of the historical background or it might not make sense. You have to know where these leagues are coming from. You have to know enough culturally about where it's coming from. And I mean, we just try to give you what we hear and what we see and give you our opinions on it and try to, keep everybody informed as best we can. We'll see what happens. Everybody's figuring it out on the fly. Everybody will be figuring this out. Different leagues bring different challenges because some are in better financial positions, some are in worse. Some have a more forgiving, country, government, community, whatever. Some don't. Some are going to be easier to reconstitute. Some won't be. those things do factor in, and I think we have enough institutional knowledge at this point to be able to have those conversations pretty well.
And for me, it's been the inverse. I started watching games in the Premier League and lower divisions and things like that, and I've worked my way backwards, obviously, watching games in MLS and lower divisions and all that kind of stuff. So that was where my knowledge base was, and it's just been study hall every day, trying to get better at knowing what's going on.
Very good.
So I believe we are caught up, sir, and that would probably end up being a show.
Yes, that will be a show today. Tomorrow we'll be back normal time in the morning. We're going to continue our Twitch experiment as we do the show with video. We don't have the Smokey the Bear PSA, but Smokey the Bear is hanging out over here making sure we stay in line. You can join us, twitch.tv/soccer down here. Thanks, Turner Kirby, for hanging out in the chat room this morning.
Yes.
You can always tweet at us. You can always listen live. We're live at 9 o'clock. You can always listen on demand as well. So we're working out all the kinks. We're figuring some things out, and that's been one of the things that I've been trying to get better at with this whole stoppage in play is learning some new skills. So putting them to use with some more video programming here on the SDH network. We'll be back in the morning. We got stoppage time, 2 o'clock today. Facebook.com/929thegame. Myself, Mike Conti, will give you everything that comes out of Atlanta United training today, a few other MLS teams training today. We'll keep you updated on that. Everything out of USL and anything else that comes up in the soccer world. That's at 2. We're back tomorrow at 9. Mucha plata, y'all.
Mucha plata, y'all.